Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. If you're anything like me, picture frames was one of the things you took on early in your woodworking journey. I'm no different. The frames in my house were done in a lot of hemlock and they had stain on them. And needless to say, they're not up to the standards and the wife has let me know about it. So, time for some new picture frames in the house. But in order to accomplish that, I need a new miter sled. I need a good one that does 45s dedicated for pictures. I could use the Kerf sled, I could use the miter saw, but I just don't have that repeatability from cut to knock out the number of frames that I need to do for the house. So, stick around, let's get going, let's build that sled first. So the first thing I need is some hardwood runners. And I've cut this, it's just a smidge oversized. I could probably get it in there, but it's going to be way too tight. So I'm going to go ahead and just push this through the drum sander, get it sized perfectly. Then I'll cut it in half and get it to final. So because of the size of the scrap board that I grabbed to make the runners, I ended up with more than I really needed. I'm actually going to cut one of these in half to use for this project, and I'll cut the other one in half and set it aside, and I'll just put a label on it, say future runners for future sled or something like that. Okay, so just a little test fit shows these are still just a little bit wide because I'd like that to be just below the surface. So we'll go get this cleaned up at the drum sander, get ready to go. So this is a piece of leftover 3/4 ply that I had from one of the other projects, either this table or the planer card, I don't recall. And this side down here is pretty square. That side up there I cut something off of before and it is nowhere near square. So we're going to cut from this side. I'm just going to start by making this 24 by 24 and I'll get it square on there, and whatever that final dimension happens to be is what it is. But we definitely need it square. Alright, so I cut that all 4 sides off the table saw. See how we did. Looks pretty dead on. So I'm just going to drill and countersink a couple of holes in here, so when I use super glue to get them in place, these holes are already done and I don't have to disturb that. I can just drop some screws in. So I grabbed some washers out of my other shop there, out of the metal side. And I'm just going to drop them in the bottom of the runners here so that those runners end up just a little bit proud of the surface. You get them on here. Then when I bring the plywood in, I'll set it on here, put super glue on, get it lined up as best we can right off the bat. Alright, so my runners came off the front edge, so I missed those holes. That's not a big deal. I'll put a couple more back down in here. But it's kind of nice to have these. Alright, so I'm just going to put a little wax on these runners just to help things glide a little bit better. Okay, so next up, I'm going to cut it across the back. But we got to get that, find that line. So I think we're going to come down here. I think the widest frame I'd probably ever do is about 4 inches. We'll go ahead and give it a little bit extra. We'll come down 6 inches from each side. So just be sure to double check yourself. I carried those cut lines around to the bottom side. I wanted to make sure the blade wasn't going to hit the screws. And sure enough, our blade would have run right through the middle of those screws. So it's easy to fix now. That would have been a real bummer on the blade though. So just to show you why it's a good idea to double check those measurements. Both of the screws, just out of pure luck, would have been right in the way of the blade. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and cut a curve part way into this so I can start lining up that new section. Just remember, don't cut this all the way through. So I'm just going to pre-drill a couple of pilot holes in here and countersink them so we can attach it, figure out where it goes. But I also have some T-track and stuff I want to put in here, so these may not be permanent locations. Just enough to get us attached. So I decided to shorten this up just a little, and I cut a scrap down to about 4.5. 6 inches was just bigger than anything that I needed. So I went ahead and narrowed it down to 4.5, and I cut a square strip at 4.5. I flushed it up on this side, clamped it in place, put the centerpiece on and brought it up to center of the kerf, and then I verified that I was square. You know, as square as you can be looking by eye. Test cuts are the only way to be 100% sure. But this is really dead on. So I'm going to go ahead and attach this piece in here for now. Okay, time to make a little test cut here and make sure that this is good and accurate before we start playing with bells and whistles. I had a little offcut of walnut from another project. I don't know what it was. It's about 3 7/8 wide, so I figured that would be good for the test. Let's make a couple of cuts. Pretty dead on. Okay, so off camera I just cut this little scrap piece of maple that I had laying around. Put a center line on that. I put a center line on this. Just something for a push handle. It's not too comfortable square, so I'm just going to take it over to the router table and put a couple of big roundovers on the top, and I'll leave the bottom square. That should give us a nice push bar. It's a pretty good size roundover I have in here, so I've slowed the router speed down. And we're not going to take it all in one shot. We'll take a couple of passes. So I just located a couple of holes back here so we can mount the block, the push block. Then I'm just going to pilot drill those. So again, back to my scrap bin. Had a couple of pieces of maple sitting in there to work real well. And I'm just going to line them up on here so that they're flush. It gives me a little more fence room. I'm going to mount a couple of pieces of T-track in it. It'll allow me some clamp down, but more importantly, it's going to allow me to build stop blocks so I can have repeated cuts. But first thing we got to do is go ahead and cut the dado in to accept this. And then we'll clamp it down and we'll mark for these bottom corners and get those cut off. Then we'll work on making a stop block. So yeah, the first thing to do is cut the dado in these. Okay, so I'm going to run these in a couple of passes and sneak up on the depth I need. Nice fit. Okay, so I'm just going to use a couple of pen nails and some glue to get these held in place where we want them, keeping everything lined up with the edge. Then we can cut a new kerf cut in the top when we're done. So I took a little scrap piece of walnut out of my bin, and I'm just going to make a berry block, just something a little extra protection for your hands. And I'm just going to glue that in place. I might round off the front a little bit. I don't know. It's shop furniture. I'm not too worried about it, but I do want that protection in place. So I'm going to glue that in. So while that glue's curing up on the berry block, I'm going to go ahead and create some extensions. I'm just going to dig back into my scrap bin again, and I'll cut a little notch in here that rides in the groove in this T-track, and then it'll have some bolts coming through so you can tighten it down, and you can slide that anywhere you'd like on there, and I'll have a block on the end to use as a stop block. I have to create 2 of these as I want to have repeatability on both sides. Okay, so I tossed a sacrificial fence on, and I'm just going to notch each side of those until I sneak up and make it fit in that groove. Then I'll come back and drill some holes. So I just set the drill press up with a 1/4 inch bit, take the toilet bolt, and going to put a few holes in here so I can extend it out on that T-track pretty much anywhere I want. So there's the slides on there. I just need to create a couple of stop blocks, and this thing should be ready to go. All right guys, well there it is. Super happy with it. Stop blocks just work great. I can move them up and down anywhere I need to move them, and so I can get my repeatability out of that. And of course they'll slide out even longer if I have some longer stuff as well. There's another jig that I use in the shop. I can't take credit for it. I got it from one of the great builders over on Wood Talk Online forums. I'm just concerned that this is a little bit heavy on the backside. So I'm going to show you real quick my solution for that. I don't have a build journal for it, and I really should give credit to the one whose idea I snagged that from, but I don't recall who it was off the top of my head. When I find it, I'll put it in the show notes. But yeah, let me show you that real quick. So there it is. It's kind of my version of it. Just an extension to give you a little more outfeed room on the table saw. I'll go ahead and I'll cut some miter slots in it so I get a little bit more out of it. But when I built this, I wasn't intending on the use. But for now, still gives me a little bit extra off the back side. Gives me a little bit more support there. So there you go guys, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next one and we'll start working on some picture frames.